Okay, cool. Welcome back, everyone, to Philosophy Roulette. This is number 236. Is that right? Yes, that's 235 right there. So that means we are on 236 because that's how numbers work. Where I read and review philosophy papers live on Twitch and then later on YouTube. At VODs, as we like to call them, videos on demand. But these are streams. So you can come and join me and comment and help me choose what to read and like when I say something silly, you can make fun of me. So I don't say too many silly things, I think. But that's the nature of silly things. You don't know when you're saying them until it's usually too late. But let's see what's on the front page of Phil Papers. See what good stuff we got. BJPS, Digital Literature Analysis for Empirical Philosophy of Science. What is this like? Empirical philosophy of science. We're going to do like not public philosophy, like experimental philosophy of science. Cool. Then we've got British Journal for Sex. The Brits are putting stuff out. And we got Urkentness, Oyston versus Archimedes, and on Limbo's Infinite Balance. All right, so let's just go see if these are available. Seem like fun things. Oh, I should, if there's no page numbers on these, I can't do it. Well, if they're not available. Ooh, download. Look at that. Daniel Howick. I know Daniel Howick. He was here in New York for a while. He's in Virginia Tech now. Let's see how long this one is, though. I like how Phil Papers put the download button right there in the upper right-hand corner. Yes, this is a note. 4 pages. So this is definitely something I like to do. Short and sweet. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, Daniel was a frequent at the New York Philosophy of Language seminar here in Manhattan. Well, not here, I'm north of Manhattan, but here in New York. And, yeah, so I'd see him around. Philosophical Studies, Mind. We already got something from Urkentness. We can go check out our aesthetics, just see if there's anything. Usually these things are too long, though. Let's see. Oh. Erotic art is proprioceptive art. Well, that sounds exciting. I mean, I hope that's available. Jiri Benovsky. From jiribenovsky.org. Articles. Oh god, is it in French? I don't read French. That'd be really sad if it was like available but only in French and I can't read it. Is there like papers? Philosophy. Works. Works. Academic. Cinesemiotics. Yay! Yes. You're like, I'm actually reading like French art peoples without you asking me to do it. So these are books, and I don't read French, so I don't know what's going on. Alright. Let's see if I can go find this paper, though. I bet it's here somewhere. Academic articles, of course. Why was I... Didn't just go there. Okay, so what are we looking for there? We're doing, if we can, erotic art as proprioceptive art. Let's see. Here we go. Oh, it's not here. That's just me. That's just such a tease, because they put the link down here, and it's not there. You see that? I tried cinesemiotics. You think that was one you chose? And it's getting old for you? I just did one of yours 2 times ago. So like there's one of yours that you asked for is coming up soon. So I don't have access to this now, but we can put this on the back burner. We'll do it in like a week or 2. Yeah, I mean, I don't like go looking in special places usually on stream, but like this can of course be done. Actually, let's see. Wait, hold on. The link there is the guest access key link. So thank you, because some of the journals, what they do is they let you, if you link from your personal site, then you can actually do it. So we've got the paper. Because I just didn't notice when I moused over the first time that it was the fancy link. It was the fancy link. So there's 12 pages. I mean, it's, yeah. So here's what we're going to do. So, yeah, semiotics can be happy. Let's see. It's probably this one. Am I right? I am right. Okay. So let's get the links here. So we've got this. So, and if you want to go pick the paper up, what you do is you go to, oopsie. You can go here and you can type !paper if you come into chat, and it'll get you back here. And on this one, what you do is you go to the author's website, you click on the philosophy articles, and then you can just click on here. And this is the special link. I don't know if you can, of course you can't read the little bar at the bottom, but you can. It has a guest access key there, which means that you're getting it directly from the author's website, which the journal allows for. So cool. So that's what we'll do, and then we can always get back to Dan Hoek later, which is nice that I always like having multiple things to do. Cool. So work. There we go. Cool. So I apologize for how I say everyone's name, because I don't know how Jiri is supposed to be pronounced. Benovsky, I'm guessing, and everything else that's not in very boring English. Yeah, and we're off. Now, I know a little bit of philosophy of art. I don't know anything specifically about erotic art. I know what the word proprioceptive means, but I'm sure they'll define it here. But, that's really, this is not my, wheelhouse, but whatever. Okay. The philosophical, so it's not an abstract. This is sort of like a introductory sentence. Interesting. The philosophical discussion about erotic art has often been understood in terms of the possibility of erotic art as a form of visual or auditory art. In this article, I focus on erotic experiences qua proprioceptive experiences, and I defend the claim that under the right circumstances, such experiences can bring about proprioceptive artworks. Okay. And if we don't define proprioceptive, I'll get to it. But yeah, as per usual, feel free to ask questions along the way, and I will do my best to answer them. Introduction. The philosophical discussion about erotic art has often been understood in terms of the possibility of erotic art as a form of visual or auditory art. This is not specific to erotic art. Visual and auditory artworks dominate not only debates in philosophical aesthetics, but also the common understanding of what art is and what an artwork is. Paintings, sculptures, symphonies, and the like immediately come to mind. In a recent book, Benovsky, Benovsky's referencing themselves, I guess I suggest, and they make it clear that they're referencing themselves. I suggest that there is great interest in acknowledging the possibility of non-visual and non-auditory artworks, such as intellectual artworks, like theories, gustatory and olfactory artworks, such as gustatory and olfactory experiences of some meals or drinks, as well as proprioceptive artworks, which will be at the core of my interest in this article as well. In the book, I focus on rock climbing, and I also include martial arts, following the work of Schrenk, and dance, following the work of Montero, as activities which, in the right circumstances, give rise to proprioceptive works of art. In this article, I will focus specifically on sexual and erotic activity, and I will defend a parallel claim drawing on both Schrenk's and Montero's ideas and methodology. Under the right circumstances, such activities can bring about proprioceptive artworks. Immediately just getting this, I'm starting to think that we need to talk about video games, and Twitch is something too that, this sort of interactive here. Proprioceptive is bodily feedback. That's kind of what it is talking about. So the idea that you're having some sort of special bodily feedback, well, of course, sexual and erotic activity, there is bodily feedback there, but that you could do something new in terms of an artwork of bodily feedback is what's why this is an interesting topic. But moreover, I'm thinking these are talking about just immediately they're talking about rock climbing and martial arts. Now, of course, there's bodily feedback in those things, but in video games, you are also, in some sense, engaged with a controller. You might have to move with like the accelerometer games. Of course, in VR and virtual reality, you have a lot of feedback, and as a point of fact, some of the porn companies have been at the forefront of the virtual reality technology, and so there is good reason to think that the virtual reality space and the game space will have a role to play here. So I wonder if that'll get mentioned in this article. It is crucial from the start to be clear about the distinction between the possibility of erotic art qua visual or perhaps auditory art and the possibility of erotic art qua proprioceptive experience. These are two different things. Most attempts at characterizing erotic art concern the first possibility. For instance, Webb focuses on erotic art as on a depiction. To Webb, erotic art is art on a sexual theme related specifically to emotions rather than mere actions and sexual depictions which are justifiable on aesthetic grounds. In a similar vein, Levinson defines erotic art as art which aims to engage viewers sexually through explicit sexual content and that succeeds to some extent in doing so. The core notion is here the notion of an audience, as is explicitly stated by Mays. Erotic art is art that is made with the intention to stimulate its target audience sexually and that succeeds to some extent in doing so. There is, of course, nothing wrong with the question whether depictions or performances of erotic art and sexual activities can be artworks, but that is not the question I will be addressing here. I will be interested in the possibility of the proprioceptive experience of the one who engages in sexual activity as being an artwork. What was that? The Fuck of the Century in what was that movie with Sharon Stone and Michael Douglas? Yeah, they have sex and like Michael Douglas is very impressed with himself and he's like, that was the fuck of the century. That's an artwork. Schrank rather briefly mentions something very close to this possibility and focuses on sex work. Would, for example, a sex worker's performance on one's body where intense proprioception is secured be art? There is probably no reason why sex work could not become an art. Here I shall take that possibility seriously and develop it in detail. A comparison with dance can be useful. Dance can be considered as a form of art from the third-person point of view, namely as a performance viewed by an audience, but it can also be considered as a form of art from the first-person point of view of the dancer himself or herself. Not by looking at himself or herself in, say, a mirror, but rather by focusing on his or her proprioceptive experience, which she or he, I'm just going to go with they if this author keeps doing this stuff, which they are the only one to have. Barbara Montero has rightly argued that dance can give rise to genuinely proprioceptive aesthetic experiences. One can deem a certain movement beautiful based on one's proprioceptive experience of the movement. Athletes, models, and perhaps even those with natural grace may sense the beauty of their movements proprioceptively, but the proprioceptive aesthetic sensibility of the dancer is perhaps the most pronounced. She is right about the fact that dance can give rise to proprioceptive aesthetic experiences, but there is no reason to think that dance is a special case. This is then what I want to focus on here. One's proprioceptive experience when involved in a sexual activity and the possibility that this proprioception to be such that 1, it exhibits aesthetic properties and that 2, it can count as a work of art. I mean, just from this quick rundown of things that would be involved in art, like dance immediately comes to as the author mentioned, but like it just seems that there's definitely experience here. I'm sorry you might be waiting for doing so, but could you please provide some idea of what the word pre-pepperoni means? Well, proprioception is bodily feedback. So when you put your fingers together, you can't actually describe this, because like you can feel like what's touching something else. Like you can press this and like, all right, so you can feel your finger pressing up against something. But when you press against like your own hand, you're getting double feedback. So proprioception is the reflexive body feedback that you get. And it has to do with the interaction with what you do with the world. So, like, for instance, like when you wear a hat, this is from the French psychologist Merleau-Ponty, was big on proprioception, that you don't have to think about, like picking up a cup, because you have a sense of what it is to grasp the cup, because you kind of don't have to think about where hey, what's up, Evan? You do not have to think of where each of your fingers are when you grasp the cup. In some sense, by just having a sense of your body, a bodily feedback, you can just grab the cup and then you can drink it. I mean, I guess if you're Donald Trump. But that was the whole thing about the Donald Trump can't drink water with one hand, is that he was failing at something that's such a basic... Thanks for the lurk, Evan. I appreciate it. Failing at something that's so basic, like being able to grasp a cup, because we have this proprioception of already kind of where your hand is, the shape it's taking, and what it's doing without you having to think about it. And so this sort of like physical... like the physical knowledge you somehow have, the feedback of that is what a proprioception is. You have a perception of your body in space and how it's moving and like what it's doing. Yeah, I was hoping that the author would give a clearer definition. But that's why when they're saying, look, athletes, models, and perhaps even those with natural grace may sense the beauty of their movements proprioceptively, alright. So, this is the thing. You're sensing the beauty of your movements. So you don't need, in this case, we're talking about beauty because it's artwork, but you can sense the whatever of your movements proprioceptively. So you understand what you're doing in some sense, and it's not the beauty of your movements, it may be the crudeness of your movements that you understand in your feedback, or the ease with which you pick up a glass of water. But that's sort of like the interesting thing. So like us Minesweeper players, we understand how to like click a mouse very, very quickly in little boxes. And you understand that, but you don't have to think about it in some sense, because you just end up clicking very quickly where you want to some of the time. So, like, that's the thing. Once you get practiced at something, like if you play a musical instrument, then you're going to get bodily feedback, and you don't have to think about that. You get automatic feedback. Let me know if that was helpful. If not, I'll try to think of some other way to say stuff. Okay, so... 2. And so what they're talking about here is, can these ways that you get bodily feedback count as an artful way of doing it? It's not beauty for like just the beauty of their movements, but in the way you are understanding your movements as feedback, can that be a unique and beautiful experience? So, yeah. And then we're going to have erotic art, which is going to provide another kind of bearing on this. And so it's not beauty, but you're going to have some sort of other sort of aesthetic experience when you're doing, like when it comes to erotic art. So you're going to have a unique experience because of the work of art that is in the area of proprioception. Yeah. Artworks. Okay, continuing. And yeah, feel free to ask more questions. There are 2 questions to be considered. First, can a proprioceptive erotic sexual experience be such that it possesses aesthetic properties? Second, can it be artwork? Taking on board as a rather plausible premise the idea that it is necessary for something to possess aesthetic properties in order to be able to count as a work of art, the first question actually raises a necessary but not a sufficient criterion for evaluating the second. To answer the second question, here are some criteria for being an artwork, which it will be helpful to consider. A. Artworks possess aesthetic properties. B. Artworks are subject to aesthetic judgments. C. Artworks have the capacity to trigger aesthetic experiences. D. Artworks have the capacity to trigger emotions. E. Artworks have the capacity to convey meanings and ideas. F. Artworks qua objects can have relative non-aesthetic features and a non-aesthetic function. G. Artworks require skill to be produced. H. Artworks are challenging for both the artist and the observer. So these are all This is just like a rundown of what people have said about art. All of these criteria play some role in the evaluation of something when it comes to determine whether it is an artwork or not, perhaps especially A, B, C, and D. Below, I am going to examine them in turn to see how they apply to the case of a sexual proprioceptive experience. It is important to note that this list of criteria is not a set of necessary and sufficient conditions, and they do not constitute a definition either. I suggest to consider them in a weaker sense as mere indicators or pointers that help us to get clear about the notion of a work of art and help us to apply it to various cases. While, of course, the criterion on this list can all be seen as being controversial, they are rather standard points and often presented in any debate about the nature of artworks. Yeah, I mean, this is fair. This is just like a rundown of what people have said. And the reason the author is doing this, let me just finish this up. They're going to say it. For me, in this article, they thus constitute more or less optimal useful guidelines. I am going to apply them to the case of sexual proprioceptive experiences and see how they fit. But to be very clear, I do not take on board the idea that all of the criteria need to be satisfied. Something can very well be a work of art even if it does not satisfy all of the criteria on the list. Yeah, see, what they're trying, this is more of like this sort of argument here is like, we're just going to get all the things that have the markers of art. It doesn't actually mean that any of them are art or have anything to do with it, but it's like if enough of the things get in there, you're just going to have a hard time, like disambiguating something as definitely not art. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, you're going to have a very hard time saying, well, that's really not a duck. You can still do it, but what they're doing is they're just trying to muddy the water enough that it's gonna, like, you're gonna have something that's gonna look very much art-like. And so it's the old Judge Roberts thing, I think it was. I forget who it was, but who said, like, they know porn when they see it. Well, this is exactly against that. This person saying, look, we're going to have so many things that make it look like art that just because you say it's porn and it's not having any other value, it's going to be real hard to make that sort of like knee-jerk response. Okay, continuing. To characterize works of art, we also often appeal to notions such as harmony, symmetry, unity, balance, complexity, simplicity, intensity, passion, or pleasure. Again, these do not provide a list of necessary and sufficient conditions for something to be an artwork. And an artwork does not need to exhibit all of these features, but they provide good indications that can help us to recognize something as being a work of art. Harmony and symmetry are often debated notions. The idea that something is a coherently integrated whole, where proportion, symmetry, and harmony play an important role, is often central to the way we evaluate as being a piece of art. In many cases of standard works of art, the Aristotelian notion of symmetry and Plato's notion of unity are summoned. Balance is also often cited and is, of course, strongly related to harmony, unity, and symmetry. Of course, depending on the nature of the work of art, music, sculpture, painting, architecture, or something else, these features take different forms and are implemented in different ways, but they constitute something like a common ground to the different types of cases. Complexity and simplicity are two other such features, and they often play an important role. Both complexity and simplicity can be seen as positive features of an artwork and characterize its aesthetic value. A complex work can be seen as being intriguing, intricate, and sophisticated. It can be baroquely appealing, and its overall balance will often be emphasized. Simplicity will often be considered as being elegant. Intensity is also often a crucial feature. Intensity can manifest itself in different ways depending on the nature of the work of art, but in general it is related to the idea that beauty causes passion in the audience. This is captured by criteria C and D above, of offering a response-dependent understanding of what makes something to be an artwork. As Hume puts it, beauty is fitted to give a pleasure and satisfaction to the soul. Pleasure and pain, therefore, are not only necessary attendants of beauty and deformity, but constitute their very essence. This then is the conceptual framework, the purpose of which is to help us determine whether something constitutes a work of art or not. The list of criteria A through H, as well as the notions of harmony, symmetry, unity, balance, complexity, simplicity, intensity, passion, or pleasure. Alright, so is this doing anything here just in terms of the Yeah, see, this is like a muddy the water argument. The author may or beat you not like a beat down argument, like beat you down with so many different examples, like that. This is kind of that's what they're doing. You're sort of like getting just sort of beaten over the head with examples where it's going to be like art like, or in some sense they're muddying up all the other examples so that you can't say that like one's art and the other one is not. The general scheme, it's not a bad way to argue for this sort of thing. I don't love it because it's sort of, it's like, okay, we're going to get like all the things we kind of want, but it's not going to be a like cut and dry clean argument. It's just going to be sort of, we get enough examples and we're just going to have to sort of you give in at the end. But that's fine. Okay, proprioception. Bearing the above-mentioned points in mind, let us now look more closely at the nature of a sexual erotic proprioceptive experience. I use here sexual and erotic interchangeably. Proprioception is a type of inner perception of one's own body. It usually provides us with information about the position, the posture, the movements of our body. Right now, sitting at my office table, I know about the position of my legs without having to look at them or to touch them. Of course, most of the time, I do not think about the position of my legs at all, but the information is there. I can easily access it via proprioception. While the question of whether proprioception is a type of perception is controversial, I will take it here on board. And so read these people if you don't like that. In this view, the sense of sight and the sense of hearing give us the possibility of visual and auditory perception, and the sense of proprioception provides an inner perception of our body. Is proprioception a distinct sensory modality from the sense of touch, or are both of these senses variants of one and the same perceptual modality? O'Shaughnessy claims that there are two distinct perceptual faculties, while Masson and Monnoyer defend the view that proprioception and touch are one and the same sensory modality. For the purposes of this article, I do not have to operate a choice between the two options. You have to operate a choice. I don't know that term or phrase, but I know what you mean. What is relevant here is that proprioception can be reasonably understood as a kind of perception. Perhaps we can accept here the view that proprioception, even under the claim according to which it is a distinct sensory modality from the sense of touch, is at least often supplemented and accompanied by the sense of touch. Yeah, so basically, you're going to have to accept that somehow you have understanding of where your body is in space and what you're doing when you like grasp a cup without like explicitly thinking, I have to move my hand over and like grasp the cup. So, of course, sexual activity not only provides proprioceptive experiences, but it also provides visually accessible objects, events of perception for a possible audience, for one's sexual partners, or for oneself, say if one observes herself or himself in a mirror. Dancers or martial art practitioners often do observe themselves in mirrors while they perform their activities in order to have visual information about their movements in addition to the proprioceptive information. Yo, we talking about sex? I should be tuned in for this. Shake your head. Yeah, well, it should always be who knows what you're going to read on Philosophy Roulette. That's why it's roulette. Yeah. I mean, I was just getting the American Psycho with Christian Bale. Of course, yeah, he's having sex with like mirrors around because he wants to see himself having sex. It's like, yeah. Okay, continuing. My focus in this article being the proprioceptive experience, I shall not discuss the question of whether sexual activity considered from the external point of view of an audience, including the case where the viewer is the performer, him or herself, can possess aesthetic properties and can be a work of art. I believe that we can answer positively, but this is not the issue I want to address here. See, they're not talking about like looking at porn. Like, that's not the point here. Like, if someone else is like porn, could it be art? Sure, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about is the act of doing something or interacting with something erotic or yourself having sex. Then is that a unique experience that could rise to the level of an artwork? In the case of sexual activity, it is often interesting to visually observe oneself and one's partners to get a better sense of what one is doing, as well as, of course, to obtain erotic visual stimulation. One connect this visual one can connect this visual observation with one's proprioception to get a more complete experience. The external visual experience can thus help to improve the overall experience. Again, the same is true of dancers, martial arts practitioners, or rock climbers. On the other hand, a blindfolded sexual experience or an experience taking place in a fully dark environment can be relevant precisely because it deprives one from the visual sensory modality, which often takes a place so prominently. It takes a place so prominent that it does not allow one to focus on one's proprioception properly. Sight dominates our overall sensory perception, usually so much that, when involved in sexual activity, it is often desirable to suppress it in order to be able to focus on one's proprioceptive experience. By being blindfolded or in a dark room, or simply by closing one's eyes, the practitioner can better access their own proprioceptive data. This is something I assume that typical practitioners do very frequently, at least by closing their eyes at some times, and it shows how central proprioception is, quite obviously I would say, in sexual activity. I like this sentence, that they assume that the practitioners of sex do something. It's just sort of it's a funny sentence, because I think they're poking fun at themselves, like, I'm not even claiming that I have sex. Thus, there is a public, external, third-person point of view performance of sexual activity which is visually and/or auditorily publicly accessible, and there is a private and more and private below. First-person only proprioceptive experience, and these two are different things. The view I want to focus on here concerns the latter. Yeah, exactly. Hey, there is no masturbation would definitely fall under the purview of this article, so you don't have to, even if you haven't gotten laid, as long as you've touched yourself before, this is still going to apply to you. You don't have to worry about not understanding this paper. So, there you go. Exactly. I figured you'd at least have that perspective on it, Evan. For everyone else out there, I mean, have at it. It's been a long and dry pandemic. So what are you going to do? Proprioception is almost always there, but not always in the way relevant to our purpose here. O'Shaughnessy rightly insists that proprioception takes a backseat in consciousness almost all the time. For instance, I know about the position of my legs at all times when I am awake, which allows me to walk, move, etc., while I almost never actively think about my legs at all. If any proprioceptive experience has any chance to constitute an artwork, it must be a conscious one, and this is important. It has to be focused on by the subject. Granted, some minor proprioceptive inputs might get only processed in an unnoticed way, and still they might unconsciously contribute to the overall experience, but the overall experience and most of its aspects has to be conscious and focused on. In short, one needs to pay attention to their proprioception. O'Shaughnessy calls this introspective proprioception. Proprioception where our body position, posture, and movement are the focal point of our attention. This is why sports activities in general, whether practiced seriously and involved focused training, are good candidates for being activities where aesthetic properties of proprioceptive experiences can be found. Paying attention to one's proprioception is crucial in order to give rise to an aesthetic experience. As in sports, when it comes to sexual experiences, one can more or less focus and be aware of one's proprioception. Say that two partners are having sexual intercourse and that they talk a lot, making the content of what they are saying the central point of the overall experience and the central erotic stimulus. Of course, tactile, visual, auditory, and proprioceptive stimuli will also be relevant, but they will not be central to the experience and they will not be focused on. In this situation, the proprioceptive experience will be similar to the proprioceptive experience of two people jogging while chatting during their run, focusing more on the conversation than on the training. Compare now to the situation where the two partners do not speak, but they close their eyes and consciously focus on their inner proprioceptive experience. Typically, I assume this is often useful to reach orgasm. Again, this is funny, they assume it, along with other stimuli, tactile, visual, auditory, or cognitive, but it is useful in general in order to focus on their pleasurable bodily sensations. The fact that they pay conscious attention to their proprioception to features, the structure, and the unfolding character of the experience will allow them to grasp it better and to genuinely notice some of its properties. This is where aesthetic properties of the proprioceptive experience can be found. Let us thus consider now criterion A from the list in section 2 above. And I'm not laughing at them and saying this is funny that they keep adding the I assume, because they don't need to like imply in any way that they have sex or don't have sex. It's just the fact that they're adding this as qualifier it's unnecessary in terms of writing. I mean, you don't need to assume that this is how like orgasm is reached. It is like it's a empirical fact that tactile, visual, and maybe talking can do it. But like, it's just funny that they put this assumption in, because I don't see this as even I don't see that as a controversial statement, but I just want to be clear that I'm not making fun of anyone if they don't have sex. So, and got a few more people here now. Feel free to ask questions. We're reading on a paper on basically bodily feedback as an aesthetic experience, and this author is using erotic art as an example of what a bodily feedback, a proprioceptive art would be. So, erotic experiences. Cinesemiacs, I'm sorry, but I have to interject that I'm making fun of people who don't have sex, but I'm only doing it jokingly. Well, I'm not joking. I'm not laughing at them. If you're criticizing me, which is fair, I'm not laughing at the author. I'm laughing at the fact that they threw it in. They didn't need to mention it at all. So I'm just laughing at the sort of, it may be what I think of as, it's like when you make fun of yourself. That kind of humor, self-deprecating humor. So because that's all it is. Yes. Oh, exactly. It's like you can do it. It's a pointless thing really to make fun of virgins, because like everyone was virgin, and then like it doesn't happen. Or even if you don't get laid, it doesn't matter in any grand scheme of things. So, but like the fact that the author has repeatedly sort of made it unclear that they have any sex is I just think that's kind of funny that they think of this as a like, I don't really care one way or the other if the author has sex or doesn't, but like the fact that they're even mentioning it obliquely in their writing, I think is funny. So it's like, why? You could lie, like no one's gonna know, like it doesn't make any difference to the article one way or the other. So yeah, I think it's just a little humor. That's right. I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't making fun of anyone. I was just kind of in on the joke. See, I got a joke. That's what I was embarrassed about. And if you had some other comment, I'm sorry, send us semiotics. I just want to. You don't want to be nowadays. You don't want to be like shaming people for just no good reason. There's plenty of good reason to shame people. This is not one of them. Erotic experiences. Yeah, and feel free to ask more questions, please. There always is an ending point to a given sexual activity. It can be orgasm or some other final stage of the activity. Suppose for the sake of the example here, it is orgasm. From the beginning to the end of this experience, there's a kind of path starting with the initial preliminary arousal, continuing with excitement, pleasurable sensations, various bodily, emotional, and or intellectual experiences, and culminating in the paroxystic final stage. Of course, things do not always work in this way, and many counterexamples could be raised here, but at least sometimes this is how things go, so let's have such a situation as a useful working example now. Since Semiotics says, dude, it's okay. I think the important aspect that even the author is trying to capture is that the taboo of sex never really goes away, even when you're doing it in an academic setting. There's still the fact that you see the word penis. Thank you for that, Cinesemiotics. Yeah, like, what was that movie? Fight Club. it opened something on you, Evan. It's gotten something perked up on you. I see. Well, I always, for some reason, like just in Fight Club, when you've got Brad Pitt, he's just like, at some point he's just like a nice big cock, and so sometimes like I just think of that, like would that help this sort of really dry stuff we're watching right now? Maybe it would. Big old dick right on the page. So. By intellectual, do they mean like getting better at sex, learning more about yourself, your partner? Well, it could also be that the experience has intellectual stimulation. I made you see a penis twice now. Well, now it's 3 times. 3. So there could be things that you're learning. It could also be something you just find interesting in some. So you don't have to be learning something. You could find it like intellectually stimulating in the same sense that you like, well, maybe you like learning about pi, like the number. So like you could maybe find something like you like learning about a topic. You might also find something interesting. You might just find sex interesting as something like that you just think is an interesting thing. So you don't have to get better at it in the sense of like you're learning more about yourself or your partner, but you could find the whole experience to be interesting on it, just in general, in like some sort of abstract way. And I think that's what the sort of intellectual interest might be. So like you could just be like, well, this is interesting, and obviously the author here thinks it is interesting in this aesthetic way, and so that would be something that like the author would say would be like, in the fact that they wrote this paper is because they found there was something intellectual about it that they hadn't thought about. Okay, so where were we? Working example. So yeah, just a normal sort of an everyday sexual experience is a working example. And continue to ask questions, please. Suppose also, for the sake of the example, that this is one of the situations where the practitioners do not speak very much and tend to focus most of all on their bodily sensations. When proprioceiving their own body, they will find a complex succession of sensations which, with experience, they can both control and let freely unfold, and which involve many different body parts and various types of sensory stimuli. Thank you, Cinesemiotics. I appreciate that. Thank you for the bits. Most straightforwardly pleasurable, but sometimes rough or even painful. Sorry, getting distracted by the bits. Thank you. This is like the feedback working on Twitch is very, very crazy. What's up, DeMarshall? How you doing? Okay, where was I? Most straightforwardly pleasurable, but sometimes rough or even painful. Yeah, we're reading a paper, DeMarshall, on, well, erotic art as proprioceptive art, is that the bodily feedback as an aesthetic experience. So can you get yourself bodily feedback, and can that have artistic value here? So, and they're using erotic examples as a sense, as an example of what gives you bodily feedback. Okay, all of these proprioceptive data can, under the right circumstances, form a unified whole which, when properly balanced and when working harmoniously, gradually contributes to intense pleasure. And when the practitioners are paying attention to these sensations, they can skillfully guide them and enjoy them in a controlled way in order to decide how long the experience should be, what type of sensations are to be preferred, at what time raw simplicity works best, and at what time intricate complexity and subtlety are called for. And in the end, developing and following all of these elements, the practitioners can let them lead to the culminating stage. Orgasm itself is not a unique, simple sensation. It is complex, it has duration, it has stages, and these work best when being harmonious, balanced, intense, unified, both simple and complex, and this is how these features of it lead to passionate pleasure. All of this is not unlike the development of a symphony, including its various movements and culminating elements. Harmony, balance, symmetry are relevant and crucial in many such situations. To have one example, consider for instance, when it comes to balance pleasant sensations with rough and painful sensations, sometimes it is precisely the subtle balance between those which provides a rich and enjoyable experience. What exactly is proprioceptive art? Is it art that involves the body? Well, that's what exactly the question is here. Is there something that you can define as proprioceptive art? And the author here is going to say yes, and erotic art as a prime example of it. So that's where I assume we're going, because why would you write the paper otherwise? So, the same is true when it comes to simplicity and complexity, when it comes to strong, intense sensations and subtle, weaker ones, or when it comes to rapid succession of sensations or rather slow ones. The practitioners can skillfully create a balanced, harmonious, and unified temporally extended experience by combining these and other elements in various ways according to their personal taste. The structure of the overall experience is highly relevant, including its unfolding character and its overall features. The practitioners, of course, can and often do work on this together, while each paying close attention to their own private proprioceptive experience, but the same principle also applies to autoerotic sex. So this is what they're saying about masturbation, autoerotic, you can do it to yourself. You're loving the beard, thank you. Awesome, coming from a horror volunteer philosopher look. Yeah, basically. I'm thinking about cutting it off, but people have been telling me they like it, so I'm like, if people like it, I don't know. Okay, so basically, what's going on here is just the standard vanilla example of having sex where like you do something and you get yourself to orgasm. It takes some effort, and they're saying all of these things are going to fulfill the criteria of art above. Now, this is the whole point of my complaint above, is that, you're kind of cherry picking all the things to make it work as a piece of art. Like the fact that like this part of the erotic act can correlate to this sort of dance movement, and like flavors and smells and all the things can like, it all mixes together, and you can say, well, this is this. So the question is, are we just cherry picking here? Well, the author, like I said before, the strategy is basically to muddle everything together. So you're going to say, well, you can't deny that there might be aesthetic value in some of this. So, but I think that's kind of what just the last few paragraphs were up to. Okay, continuing, and feel free to ask more questions. Thus, we can rather easily see here that, at least on the successful days when our sexual experiences are the best, aesthetic properties are not difficult to be found in the proprioceptive experience coming from sexual activity. Indeed, as a proprioceptive affair, sexual activity is full of aesthetic experiences. In this way, the experience can be coherent and unified. It can be beautiful, or it can lack cohesion and or be dull and monotonous. All the typical aesthetic features often attributed to works of art can be found in sexual proprioceptive experiences. Harmony, symmetry, unity, passion, pleasure, balance, intensity, complexity, simplicity, and elegance all can be exemplified by such experiences. Movements of a given practitioner can be awkward and clumsy, or they can be elegant and graceful. The proprioceptive experience of the performer of these movements will then possess such features as well. The movements are often both simple and complex. Many bodily micro-adjustments are needed, and real focus on proprioception provides thus both an aesthetic experience and useful feedback in order to guide and control one's movements in the suitable way. Author spitting straight facts. Absolutely. It would be a mistake and question-begging philosophical stance to assimilate sexual activity of this kind to merely a set of pleasant sensations or to only having fun. This is fair. This is the kicker here, is that if you are going to declare that there is nothing of value in the sexual act, then you'd have to explain that too. And that was the whole point of all of this talk, is to get to this one and to say, look, if you deny it, you're going to have a worse time than me just sort of making the minimal claim that there is some aesthetic value there. So this was like, all of this work was to say this one line, really. As Schusterman puts it, unless we limit aesthetic experience narrowly to the experience of artworks and conversely confine sexual experience to unimaginative, thoughtlessly mechanical, and insensitive copulation, we should clearly recognize that sexual experience can be aesthetic. Schusterman speaks about sexual experience perhaps in a more general way and does not only focus on the proprioceptive experience as I suggest to do here, but what he says applies to our case at hand perfectly well. Can there be an aesthetic value in everything, though? It's all subjective. Well, that's the point is, yeah, maybe there can be, but what's any good then? That's a question of if you put the aesthetics everywhere, then you run into the same problem. You're just going to have to then decide or define or figure out what counts as a worthwhile aesthetic value. And so in the sense that this is saying there is some, they're saying basically that there is some that is worthwhile here. You can't deny that there is no worthwhile aesthetic experience here. Exactly. So if you generalize something, you just fall into, you don't solve the problem. You have to have standards then if it's everywhere. Or if it's not everywhere, then you can just define where it is, and that will, roughly correspond to what counts as good. So what some people say is well, there's no bad pizza, there's no bad sex. But then you can say I don't classify certain things that other people call pizza as pizza. It's like fast food. Like Domino's is good food. I just don't classify it as pizza. And so it's it's fine, but it's not pizza anymore. So that's the thing. It's is there an aesthetic experience everywhere? Well, maybe, but then you have to decide what's good and what's not. Or is pizza all the things we call pizza? Well, it is, but then you can just say, well, I would put Domino's as not really good pizza, but I feel that's unfair to those stores because the food's not bad. I don't know why some people say there's no such thing as bad pizza. There's of course bad pizza, but I've heard them say, people have said that sort of thing before. And so, but yeah, I don't know why someone would be that stupid, but people are that stupid. But yeah. Sorry, former Portland, Oregon dude here. There's no such thing as bad press. That's true most of the time, Evan. I wouldn't go with universally. I mean, there's always when you die. It's congratulations, your funeral announcement. I mean, some people would still be happy that they had one, but it's a little too late for you at that point. But yeah. Alright, continuing. Where were we? Yeah, so Schusterman is talking in general, but what he says applies to our case at hand perfectly well. Again, all of the usual features typically attributed to artworks can be found in sexual proprioceptive experiences, namely harmony, symmetry, unity, passion, pleasure, balance, intensity, complexity, simplicity, etc. And aesthetic properties of such proprioceptive experiences can thus supervene on, or better, can be grounded in these features exactly as the case with, say, symphonies or paintings. Cinesemiotics does want to point out the interesting fact that frequently the appetite for sex is compared to the appetite for food in literary devices and scenic art forms all over the place. Yeah, absolutely. That's just a fact. There's also a question of what kind of why are there this goes back to Nietzsche and the theories of drives. So we have a drive to eat. We have this constant thing. You can get satiated for food just as the way you can have enough sex, and then you can't have sex for a little while. You're satisfied, and then but it builds back up. And these are sort of drives that you have, and then you kind of you can satisfy them for a bit. But Nietzsche made this sort of thing. Cinesemiotics says, in fact, they can be so similar that we could transpose them for interesting stories anytime and imagine, for example, a sex ed book that is really about fruit or vice versa. Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. I completely agree that the metaphors are always rampant and cross-used when it comes to food and sex. So, yep. Okay. Let me just finish this up. In short, proprioceptive sexual experience can be, under the right circumstances and when paid proper attention to, full of aesthetic features, and criterion A on the list from section 2 above is thus satisfied. I missed paid proper attention to. So I just said when you pay for it, that's when it's aesthetic. I was like, oh, I didn't think they were making that claim, but that's what went through my head right there. Because you do pay to go to the museum quite often. Does that make it art? I don't know. You paid to see it. Okay. So basically, like I said, this whole section was this kicker here that if you are going to deny that there is proprioceptive aesthetic experience, you're going to have a hard time. Okay, continuing. Okay, let me get to that. Okay, and this person also has done aesthetic supervening and aesthetic grounding. Interesting. OnlyFans is only worthwhile because you have to pay for it. I understand now. Yeah, there is actually something really to the thought that once there's like value being exchanged, once there's like a monetary thing, once you have to like trade like something of worth for something, it really actually adds something to the experience, because it feels like you're getting something. And so if you give anything away for free, people will discount it, even if it's like great. You can't give a lot of stuff away for free. No, but like there is something to it. Like even if you just charge some pittance, some very small amount, the fact that people have to make the effort to pay for it will change the experience, and probably the aesthetic experience too. Some people, Peter, have sex. Nothing wrong with that. I didn't say nothing wrong with people paying for it. Sorry, that was a mistranscript. I'm going to say some people pay to have sex. No, absolutely nothing wrong with it. I just thought it was funny that I misread it, and that's what I was thinking right there. That's all. Just me getting ahead of myself, maybe. Evan says, but I guess there's something to it now that I think about. There's value added to the experience simply because there's value ascribed to it in the first place. Absolutely. And I was talking about this with Aristotle on his stream, that the commodification of the Twitch community, conspicuous consumption is what economists collect. Yeah. But the modification, the capitalist modification of Twitch communities by emotes, like you have to, by subbing, you get, they call it, not collect it. That's right. But, that once you are subbed to someone's, channel here, then you get like the emotes, and you get like priority or whatever in different ways. You get channel points faster sometimes. And so like all of a sudden, by paying for it, you're getting the same content really, but what else are you getting? And like then people have a different relationship. And you see on some of these very big streamer people, it says all donations are non-refundable, because people think that giving money, they are getting something for their money, and they want to define what they're getting. But that's not the case. And so it's like people, once you start paying money, it changes the interaction. And so it definitely makes a difference here. And then there's a huge amount of like literature on sex work and paying for sex and all that stuff. So, well, we can go look at the different people for that. I think streamers say no refunds because refunds are complicated and expenses, like Parasite, famous for being famous. No, I think there's more to the no refunds than that, Evan. Of course, refunds are complicated and expensive, but why would you it's not worth it, first of all. Of course, it's like, why would you give me money just to get a refund? But like, there's a reason why people are giving people money, because they will say, well, you have to use the money for this, because they want you to do something. And that's not how any of this is like set up to work. Of course, some people will do stuff for money, but like, I mean, not on Twitch in terms of like anything erotic, but, well, depending on what stream you're watching. But I mean, that's what I mean. It's like, the way you're interacting with people on this sort of thing, the feedback you're getting is really kind of like I like to feel important. That makes me feel so important. Exactly. Well, but that's what it is. People want to feel like they are interacting with someone in a more impressive way. It does depend on how much. But also, don't forget, some people don't have a lot of money, so like that $5 a month, that might be something to somebody, and so that means something to them. Like the fact that they are giving you their hard-earned money that they really, they're not spending someplace else. So, Yeah, people, it's very hard to understand everything when you start putting money involved. Thank you, DeMarshall. I appreciate it. Thank you, Semiotics, for the 100 bits. Yeah, so I mean, exactly, Evan. Like, how many people can you be? Yeah, and don't feel obligated to be a sub to me. But like, how many people can you really afford to be subscribed to? I mean, it's gonna add up quick. So, like, it's a monthly expense, and those things add up. So, and that's the thing. It adds up, and people expect something in return. They want like a bang for their buck. You want any gifters? Any? Don't beg. Don't beg. Okay, continuing. Of course, keep the questions coming. Criteria for artworks. What about other criteria? As we have seen, qua proprioceptive experiences, erotic experiences possess many of the standard aesthetic features artworks typically have. A and C are thus quite clearly satisfied. Such experiences both exhibit aesthetic features and provide an aesthetic experience under the right circumstances as discussed above. Ceteris paribus. D is rather obviously satisfied as well. The emotional response to a given sexual proprioceptive experience is often strong, and this is true both when things work in the desired way as well as when they do not. Schrank focuses on the proprioceptive experience of practitioners of martial arts and makes a useful comparison with standard visual and auditory arts in order to claim that the proprioceptive experience actually satisfies criterion D better than standard artworks. While many auditory and visual arts affect the intellect more than the emotions, or at least emotions only mediated through the intellect, a proprioceptive art would be directly in touch with one's feelings. What he says here, it's $10. Thank you for Semiotics for the 1,000 bits. I appreciate it. What he says here can be very well adapted to proprioceptive sexual experiences, since when practitioners are immersed in such proprioceptive experiences, they do indeed feel strongly and immediately their own bodies and the emotions associated with what is going on. Hope it is a very sexual proprioceptive experience. Well, according to this author, I don't think you have much of a choice. It just is going to be one, given the right circumstances. But yes, I appreciate the bits. They're all going to go to Scotch, probably, or maybe making the stream better one of these days. But it's going to be very high quality Scotch. And that'll be proprioceptive. This goes then hand in hand. D is that what you said? It is criteria letter D. Not that the D is being satisfied. It's criteria letter D. It's here, criterion D. Whatever that was from way above. We can look that up. This is page 7. Criterion D is artworks have the capacity to trigger emotions. Yeah, does that count as a penis reference? Oh, wait. Now I just said it. Okay. So, this goes hand in hand with criterion B, since practitioners who undergo such experiences and such emotional reactions to them can and often do talk about them, expressing aesthetic judgments about their activity, their bodily sensations, and the overall proprioceptive experience. Oh, that was beautiful would not be an empty or merely metaphorical statement to make after an experience of this kind. What about criterion E? Can a proprioceptive experience coming from sexual activity convey meaning and ideas? It is important here to distinguish between sexual activity as considered in general from an objective public third-person point of view and the proprioceptive experience of a given practitioner. The former can be full of meaning and many different ideas can be conveyed, but this is not the point to be discussed here. If we focus on the latter, can we find meaning and ideas in there? Given the fact that often, but of course not always, the proprioceptive experience of one practitioner is strongly linked to their sense of touch of the body of a partner, the proprioceptive experience itself conveys information about one's partner and thus conveys a strong sense of connection with someone. Even when focusing on one's own proprioception, one clearly feels that it is via a multifaceted bodily connection with one's partner's body that the proprioception arises, and it is the way that it is. It is the way it is. Connection and related ideas such as love, trust, or friendship, as well as their opposites, thus constitute perhaps the core of the meaning conveyed by such an experience. Other types of ideas provided by a proprioceptive experience of this type are ideas concerning the current state of one's body and can involve the notions of health, fitness, feeling good in one's body, and perhaps harmony between one's body and one's mind. In general, and relevantly to our issue here, the ideas involved in such proprioceptive experiences are, rather directly, the ideas of balance, harmony, unity, elegance, and efficiency. So, I mean, the way you can do this is you get this in other talks of aesthetic experiences. There's a notion of flow that you get when people are just in the flow of things, you're in the zone. And so I guess that would be in this area, and you hear about that actually talked about in aesthetic. Hello from your phone. Okay. See, you've got that. You know where the phone is in your hand, and you don't have to think about it. That's proprioception. Oh, you're going to eat dinner? I didn't see that. Sorry. Hey, you're still watching. Thank you. Welcome back. Yes. So, there's a notion of flow. So, if you're playing Minesweeper and you're not thinking about it, you're just clicking, that would be a notion of flow. And you can get that sort of idea of flow by doing it. Time to eat while discussing sex. That's just, redundant. We've already decided that. Food and sex are the same thing, so. Time to eat while you're eating, or time to sex while you're sexting. Okay. Continuing. This leads us directly to criterion F, since sexual activity obviously has relevant non-aesthetic features and a non-aesthetic function. Procreation is the most obvious example, while there are many other functions as well. But again, it is important here to distinguish between sexual activity as an activity on the one hand and the proprioceptive experience of a given practitioner on the other hand. My focus here is on the latter. We have just seen an example of non-aesthetic function of such proprioceptive experiences. They play a role in one's health. Undergoing such experiences is desirable for one's health and equilibrium, perhaps not unlike practicing activities such as yoga, tai chi, or similar, and focusing on the proprioceptive experience found in those. I mean, these are just martial arts, though. I mean, they're just moving slower, usually. Furthermore, following one's proprioceptive experience helps the practitioner to get better at what they're doing. It thus also has instrumental value. Often it is the aesthetic aspect of the proprioceptive experience, the elegance, balance, harmony, unity, etc., which help the practitioner to improve his or her skill. Yeah, so people sometimes say you have to think of movements as being beautiful, and that will help you to understand what to do. I don't know if that actually works, but people say that. Because I do some Tai Chi, and the instructor was saying once, be more beautiful. That doesn't do it for me. It did it for him, but he thought of it that way. I don't think of it that way, but that's okay. But it does help some people. Criterion G, the idea that artwork requires skill to be produced, is of course highly relevant here. One has to get to know one's body and appeal to past proprioceptive experiences in order to guide the overall proprioceptive experience, while being also able to let it unfold freely, make the necessary bodily adjustments and micro adjustments, organize the various stages and successions of sensations, and so on. We rarely speak of training in the general context of a sexual experience, and perhaps even less so in the case of a proprioceptive sexual experience, while yoga and tai chi practitioners do so, but it is rather clear that the skill comes with training here as well, in the sense of lessons learned from past experiences. For instance, it may take some time for some practitioners to discover how to reach orgasm, or to control the sensation and timing of ejaculation, to have only the most widely discussed and obvious example in mind, but the training involved in paying close attention to one's proprioceptive experience covers many more features and involves all types of sensations and elements of such experiences. Furthermore, some sexual activities do indeed require actual proprioceptive training, as for instance in learning how to control one gag reflex in the case of deep fellatio, or in some BDSM practices. Sinesemiak says, having studied the philosophy of art, I want to point out something very important, which is there is a big difference between a thing not being art and a thing not being art at all. There is definitely such a thing as bad art, but it is still retains its as art for philosophical purposes. Yeah, I think this has to do with something Evan mentioned earlier. There's definitely things that are crappy art, but they're still art. So yeah, absolutely, cinesemiotics. Like just because it's not good art doesn't mean it loses its status as art. So you don't want to discount something just because you don't like it or you think it fails on certain scores. Yeah, damn you, art correct. Yeah. So apparently some people learn how to control their gag reflex, and so that would be a different feedback loop that has to do exactly with this topic. So the way you can handle your proprioceptive feedback in terms of your gag reflex, and it's used in this exact sort of thing, the sexual experience. Yeah. Hey, you have a question? Do you think that you have ever imagined have you ever said sentences like those on your channel? No, I never imagined this, but I do like weird sentences just in general, so these sentences do not actually faze me that much. I like my sentences better when I write them. Was I expecting to say so many like unusual things? Not really. But I do know philosophers. I have read a bunch of stuff. So when I started reading this, I knew that I was not going to have a PG channel. How often do I say penis on my channel? That would be 5 times today. So I don't normally say it. That's not a word I normally say. I would say something more fun, I think, although penis is very fun. But yeah, I usually say something else. But yeah, so the idea that I'm going to say weird sentences, that's like kind of one of the benefits. Philosophy of ejaculation. Well, there's philosophy of sex, and I'm sure they talk about ejaculation. Yes. So, yeah, there's definitely philosophy of sex and whatnot. So I don't know. I really know very little about that topic, but I'm sure they talk about it, that sort of stuff, orgasm and whatnot. Hey, maybe we could do like a special thing. Special. We could go find philosophy of sex on fill papers, like for really fast. Let's go take a look real quick. Topics. Let's look at all. Assuming my internet works. Yeah, race, gender, and sexuality. So we got homosexuality, we've got sex selection, that's under biology. Okay, so it's just see if it can break down this at all. So we've got sex work and prostitution, sexuality under feminism. You'll just drop a penis into my chat once in a while as a non sequitur. Oh, okay. So yeah, so we've got rape and sexual violence, sex work and prostitution, and then just straight up sexuality under feminism. So I guess they classify it under feminism. I'm sure there's other ways to slice it, not in feminist ways, but then we've got a whole conceptions of sex. Yeah, so all sorts of things, gender is sexuality. So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of articles on this topic. There's books on the topic, so we can go back and read more papers on this if you guys like it. Sex work, you said 11 papers. Well, that's just how much they classified it. I'm sure there's actually a lot more, to tell you the truth. Just 11. Let's see. Philosophy of sex work. Where was that? Sexual discrimination. Let's see. Intersexuality, transsexuality, gender in sex and gender in sport. I'm thinking there should be a focused subdiscipline on the philosophy of sex, and that is the philosophy of ejaculation itself. Those are rookie numbers. You have to boost those up. Racism and sexism. So we got all of these like sexual orientation things. You see, those might be 11, but are like completely focused on sex work. I'm sure there's more than that written, and of course there's tons of stuff written not in philosophy literature. From there would be probably subdisciplines, as well as the philosophy of pre-ejaculate, philosophy of post-ejaculate sensation, or something. Yeah, and there's always the fun things from the Japanese term for the clarity you have for like the little bit of time after you jack off, and then like you're not like got like the like sexual urge in your head. So there's that like term from the Japanese that means the little bit of clarity you have during the post ejaculate time. So I wonder if like you could use that to make your philosophy better. Yeah. Exactly. Philosophy and science of post nut clarity. Go for it. Okay, so we were just talking about gagging and how that can be used for aesthetic experiences, and now we're continuing on. So please keep the questions coming, they're fun. Finally, concerning criterion H, such proprioceptive experiences are challenging in the sense that they encourage and stimulate the practitioner to do better and better, or to do differently, to be creative. If, say, something does not feel right from the proprioceptive point of view, this will encourage the practitioner to change their way of doing things. In short, the practitioner has to be finely tuned to their own body. Yeah. No one likes bad art, basically. As Cinesemiotics just mentioned, there's plenty of bad art. Doesn't make it not good art, but if you're doing it, you don't want it to be bad art. And so no one likes making bad art, I guess. And so you're always trying to make your art better. That's like one of those things. Don't make bad art. Why would you bother making the art if it was bad art? You want to at least get a little bit better at it. And so there is something else going on here that if there is this stuff, it's kind of an interesting thing. Intentionally bad art? Yeah. So that is a whole nother topic, Evan. Campy art, for example. Like if you're doing like a campy movie. So yeah, kitsch. So kitsch and campiness. So just because you're doing a kitsch or campy movie, like does that make it bad art? And like do you go from like sometimes being so bad that you somehow loop around and make it like good again? And so you're back on the good side that it's gone so bad. Refractory period? Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely people who write about kitsch and campy art, and when does something actually go from being so terrible to actually being a masterwork in camp? Yeah. So, but like, yeah, you can look that up too. Like that's also philosophy, and people talk about that. Erotic experiences qua artworks. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. Why is it easier to morally tune sex machine, but not forget I tried? I will forget. We have seen that proprioceptive experiences involved in sexual activity do satisfy the standard criteria concerning the nature of artworks, and I thus submit that such experiences indeed can be, if done in the right way, works of art. I offer here a rather inclusive view about what counts as art and what does not, what I take to be a genuinely welcome output of the discussion about erotic art. Indeed, this bears the good news that we can produce and enjoy art more broadly than what one would perhaps have thought. However, this of course does not mean that any proprioception involved in erotic activity is an artwork. Some caution concerning constraints about what counts as an artwork and about the evaluation of an artwork is in order. Schrenk focuses on proprioceptive experiences involved in martial arts, and he says, and so this is exactly where you folks were going, I think, earlier, with what counts as a good artwork or a bad artwork, and there has to be some standards. And so this is what we're talking about now. Like, once we've established that you can have erotic proprioceptive art, but then what actually is any good and what counts as art. So this is what Schenck says. Although there are many theories, the most convincing ones that I have heard say that you need to be able to assert that the creator of the work regarded it as art when they made it. So that's an intentional theory. An attitude of artistic expression. Yeah, so what were the intentions of the author? Most of them, a lot of them say something like that. You don't need to do that. For instance, we take ancient art from people that are dead thousands of years. We have no idea what their intentions were, but we still call it art, even though maybe it's more anthropology. So even intentionally bad art is art if the artist who made it intended for it to be regarded as art. Yeah, but I mean, you're that's also a race to the bottom at that time points in the semiotics. Like, maybe people don't even understand what it means to make art, and then they're intentionally making bad art without even knowing what they're doing. So I don't love the intentional based theories because I just don't trust people. Quentin Tarantino, and especially Pulp Fiction was essentially a cinematic essay on how you can turn bad art into good art if you do it right. Oh, well, okay, yeah, so it was definitely like Pulp Fiction. So it was meant to be like the sort of like kitschy thing, Pulp Fiction, like from the old magazines, and then you can do it right. If you do it right, it turns into a great movie. So yeah, that's a good point. But that wasn't, yeah, but like Tarantino was like obviously making, like, he knows how to make movies. Like, he wasn't a crap artist. And like, just by being a crap artist and be like, I'm gonna make art, then it's just sort of cringy and bad. And so that's, yeah, you have to get like, when you get to cringy art, that's really, I guess, maybe the problem. When you're just like, yeah, I can't even get near that, it's so bad. Then does that count anymore? Just because they think they are? And it's like, well, just because they think they are, it's like, well, their thoughts are bad thoughts. So, anyway, let's see what Schrenk says about martial arts. If you play your body well, like a musician plays a sonata on her instrument, you have harmonious proprioceptions. Are you a saint? Are you saint? Do I have to understand art to make art? No, but you have to be not incompetent. You have to learn something to martial. It's like people who think they're making high art with knowing nothing, they're usually delusional. You don't have to understand art to make art, but you have to not be delusional too. And that's kind of my point. So like, yeah, I should have been clearer about that. Because sometimes people think they're doing something fantastic and it's just, no. I mean, I remember when I was in like middle school, so I'm like 7 or something, like 8 years old, and I have a younger brother, and my parents take me to the elementary school, and you know, he's like 3, or no, he must have been like, so like if I'm 8, he's like 5 or something, or maybe I was like a little older. Maybe I was like 12 and he was like 9 or something like that. You can't make art. No, you just don't think it's something amazing and then be like, I'm making art. It's like, yeah. You can make art, but don't like think you're like brilliant and like just because you have the intention of doing it, that gives you the miraculous power of making art. Like, I don't know if that works for me. And I remember going I was in middle school and he was in elementary school, so he was probably like 8 and I was probably like 11, and my parents had dragged me to like all sorts of musical performances when we were kids, and I go to the elementary school thing and they're just screeching and it's terrible. And like, there's like screechy 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds like just screaming, and it's like terrible and it doesn't sound like music. And I'm like, how are you like, why is like everyone so happy here? This is awful art. Like, this awful singing is just terrible. And my parents were like, no, it's nice because it's your kid. And I was like, okay, it's my brother. I don't think it's great, but it was just like, that was the sort of thing. It's like, does that count as art? It's like, kind of. They were trying really hard, but like, I was just like, well, they're not delusional. They were just trying really hard and they didn't have any skill. But yeah, but that was sort of the thing. It's like, yeah, it's still art, but like, it's just, if you should know better, then don't do it. Okay, let me get back to this. Keep asking questions anyway. All right, so many factors, including precision, speed, and the appropriate kinetics and mental and physical fortitude, have to be in proper control. Not any performance will lead to something aesthetic, and it takes the practitioner a long, stony way under the austere guidance of their master to learn the right movements with the correct intrinsic dynamics. Yet again, just as a violinist hears when his performance is right, the martial artist will, with enough practice, herself feel when her movements are correct. As with sonatas, it is it is then that proprioceptive pleasure is greatest. It has to be intended for someone else to see it and to understand it as being something you want them to see. So is there no private art then, cinesemiotics? You can't make art just for yourself, or is then that your future self? Yeah, so you can make something for your future self. That would be fine. Yeah, I guess but so there can't be art that just disappears. So like mandalas, there's still people see them, but they get wiped away very quickly. But yeah, I guess any art that just disappeared would be very transient and might not count as art then. Maybe. I mean, sure. But I'm not sure then you have to intend someone else to see it. Like, couldn't you just make stuff and it'd be cool? Big objection to the idea is that you can make good art, or if you're delusional, keep in mind that some of our most celebrated postmodernist artists intentionally made what we would call bad art for the purpose of bringing our attention to the very idea of what makes it bad and how we compare it to the things that already exist as art. Yeah, but I'm not arguing against like good or bad art. I'm just saying that like delusional artists should stop. Snapchat nudes might be art, but they probably are doing something else. And how much are you paying for those, Evan? Like, there's probably better uses of your money. But I'm not saying no. It might be worth it. And I'm definitely saying those things take work. Getting a good selfie takes a lot of work. And you see all these people doing it. And obviously, some people do it much better than others. If everyone could do it, well, I mean, I was assuming you were paying for it. Yeah. But like, yeah, there's definitely work in taking a good picture of yourself. And so like, there is definitely work there. So I don't want to like degrade how much time and effort people put into that stuff. If anyone could do like, just make cool like pictures of themselves and sell it, it would be, well, no one would buy it because everyone would do it, but like, it would be a different world. So, okay. Schrenk is entirely right, and what he says here can be very well applied to the case of sexual proprioceptive experiences as well. We have already seen how experience, skill, and even training stem from such proprioceptive experiences and how they influence each other. Proprioception helps to improve skill, and better skill helps to have more valuable proprioceptive experiences. Schrenk's nice way of putting the point, namely the idea of playing one's body eloquently, sums up the idea that as it takes time and effort to master a musical instrument, it takes time and effort to master one's own body and one's own proprioception, and it is only then that an appropriately aesthetic proprioceptive experience can take place, giving rise to a proprioceptive artwork. And you see here, right here, cinesemiotics, the author is saying, no, certain things do not count as proprioceptive artworks. So that's the thing right here. They're saying it is only then, once you have the requisite skill. And that was kind of what I was saying too. It's that like, yeah, so people need to have the intention, but like that, I don't know if that always is enough to get them over the hump of making where it's just garbage before it eventually turns into art. I think you have to know something, so, or at least a little bit. It may not be a lot you have to know, but you have to like be able to know something a lot of times. Now that's the question: can like animals make art? Do they know something? And and then again, we're like cave painting. Does that count as art from like way back when? From like people a million years ago, cave paintings. So thinking that people would send you, they'll definitely send you nudes if you pay them. So. Okay, it counts. Yes, it counts. Well, that is a good complex question. I'll take it up later, but just keep in mind the dimensional changes that happen with self-reference. Yeah, sure. I do. I know. No animals cannot art. Okay, then. Well, there we are. Even if they intend to? Maybe they intend to. Skill and competence of a given practitioner also plays an important role when it comes to evaluate. Yeah, you going to explain that or no? Skill and competence of a Yes, skill and competence of a given practitioner also play an important role when it comes to evaluate a given proprioceptive experience, especially to evaluate its aesthetic features. No, synesthetic is not calling animals stupid. As in art, not everyone is a good evaluator, as of course not everybody is an artist, that is a skilled and involved practitioner. Well, I feel bad for your dog. In order to be genuinely relevant, the aesthetic judgments involved in criterion B should then always be judgments provided by a skilled and experienced practitioner. You would have to provide evidence that they intend in the way that you mean intention and in the way you mean art, which is extremely unlikely. Yeah, well, this is my question then. Are like people who we can't ask those questions to, did they ever do art? Like dead people. And even they don't even have to be cave people. They could be people from just like a few thousand years ago in cultures that are long gone. I mean, how do you know that they mean art like the way we mean art? Like, did they not make art? Yeah. But yeah, exactly. Let's let it go for another time because that's separate from this paper. And this author is arguing that, like, at least evaluatively, in order to be genuinely relevant, aesthetic judgments involved in criterion B should then always be judgments provided by a skilled and experienced practitioner. To be even able to notice and see the beauty, elegance, grace, fluidity, harmony, balance, power, intensity, or originality of one's movements and of one's proprioception in general while undergoing a sexual experience, one needs to have enough competence as well as enough relevant experience to be able to compare the current experience to previous experiences. A novice or a less skilled practitioner might simply not be able to work with their proprioception well enough to have a sufficiently complex and rich proprioceptive experience to give rise to proprioceptive artwork. See, now the author is making fun of people who are bad at sex. Right here. They're like, you can't do it as good as me because I am practiced. Granted, some amount of elegance and proprioceptive beauty can be achieved without too much skill, but usually it will be true that the more a practitioner is skilled, the more they will be able to create proprioceptive experience that will be an artwork, in virtue of exhibiting harmony, symmetry, unity, balance, complexity, simplicity, intensity, passion, pleasure, and so on. You gotta go, but quick question. Is the next episode after this 237? It will be. Yeah, I mean, that's the number. I assume so. I don't know if I'm gonna do another one right now. But like the next one after this will be 237, yeah. So why do you like 237? Because this is 236. And thanks for coming by. I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you for the bits again, and I hope you have a fantastic night or day. Or you're in the U.S. I think. So have a great night. Okay. Yeah. So like you need some skill. In this sense, it might be the case that B is perhaps even more. That was really. Oh, okay. Yeah, don't go in room 237. That's right. Yeah. In this sense, it might be the case that B is perhaps even more important when it comes to proprioceptive artworks than when it comes to visual and auditory artworks. So it might be the case at B, which are more easily accessible to an unexperienced spectator. Since the case of proprioceptive artworks, the spectator also has to be the artist, which implies that the spectator has to be skilled enough not only to relevantly appreciate the work of art, but to actually create it. Yeah, I knew you were somewhere in the U.S. I didn't want to tell where exactly, but yeah, I try not to dox people if I can. But yeah, so. You're going to send me some info over Whisper? Okay, cool. Yeah, and so this is interesting. The author just claimed right here, though, point this out, that because this is like, it takes skill to understand what's going on, that you have to actually have more skill to actually understand what counts as like an erotic artwork. Well, we always appreciate when Synesthetic is here. As in standard cases of art, the evaluator's aesthetic taste also plays an important role here. Preference variance is huge when it comes to sexual experiences. Some practitioners will prefer slow and delicate proprioceptive sensations, while others might prefer quick and rough ones. And this is only one of the most obvious points where we can see how individual taste plays an important role in erotic experiences. Taste, as we were saying before. But the notion of taste we seek here, when it comes to evaluate such proprioceptive experiences and their aesthetic value, is not just a notion of mere liking. Sibley puts it nicely. When I speak of taste, I shall not be dealing with questions which center upon expressions like matter of taste, meaning roughly a matter of personal preference or liking. It is with an ability to notice or discern things that I am concerned. This is why synesthesiotics can do whatever they want to do. You're a fake intellectual, so am I. I just fake it good. This is why the capacity to discern beauty of skilled and experienced practitioners will be higher than the capacity of, say, a novice whose taste will be closer to a mere liking. For instance, an experienced practitioner might be able to discern more subtle variance or to recognize value and originality in some elements which they perhaps initially dislike, and so on. Hume's claim that not everyone's taste counts and not everybody can play the role of a good critic of art comes in mind here. It is thus not surprising that experienced practitioners, while of course keeping in mind their own personal taste, will be able to agree on the aesthetic properties of a given sexual proprioceptive experience, and they will evaluate the given proprioceptive artwork accordingly. It is of course not possible to share such artworks directly, since they are private, or more private in section 7 below, and in this sense they can be evaluated directly only by one evaluator. But this does not prevent relevant comparisons to be made, since competent evaluators can use indirect means to make the comparisons by simply talking about their respective proprioceptive experiences. Yeah, so sure. Since you have to actually be part of the act to know what is relevant here, they're saying that, look, that's the only way you're going to learn what's going on, and that's the only way you're going to know what's good and what's not in terms of an aesthetic experience in this case. So it's not just liking it because you like having sex, but having an actual ability to recognize or notice or discern. It is with an ability to notice or discern things I am concerned, and that's a matter of taste. To know what counts as good. That's what taste is in this case. So, all right. So almost done. We're at page 10 of 12. So we're gonna get to page 11 soon too. So almost done. Let's get this done, and then yeah, cool. And please keep asking questions. It's kind of a fun paper, of course. Privateness. Proprioceptive experiences are accessible only to the subject of those experiences and are thus private in this sense. This does not mean, however, that they cannot be works of art. It would be question-begging here to say that something cannot be an artwork if it is not publicly accessible. But it does mean that the private character of proprioceptive artworks make them rather special when compared to more standard public artworks, such as visual or auditory artworks. Well, it makes it more like a single performance for one person. And you can, of course, sing a song for a single person. In addition to the striking feature, erotic proprioceptive artworks are such that the subject is both the artist and the spectator, which practically translates into the experience by realizing that it is both important to guide and control one's proprioceptive experience, but also to be able to let freely unfold and simply observe it. Perhaps the most obvious example include the fact that it is not possible to get an erection or to have an orgasm just by a fully controlled voluntary decision. Indeed, it is a crucial part of the overall experience and the overall skill of the practitioner artist to find the balance and harmony between active control and a more passive attention to one's proprioception, one's movements, and so on. I do think there are people who can orgasm on command, but I don't know what that. I'm not one of them. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that. It's just I know that's not typical. But even when the subject adopts a stance close to a spectator's one, simply letting happen and attending to their own proprioceptive experience, the experience is private. It can only be directly accessed by the subject and nobody else. Of course, similar experiences can be had by different practitioners, and it is possible for two practitioners to have the same type of proprioceptive experience, and thus be able to compare their experience by talking about them. But it is not possible to share the same token. In this way, an experienced practitioner can, for instance, encourage another practitioner to do this or that in such and such a way, like a composer who would provide a score for a piece of music that different practitioners can then execute, and consequently several practitioners can, in this limited sense, share the same experience, which means that they can have a similar experience, even if not strictly speaking the very same one. This is also how one and the same practitioner can repeat undergoing a given proprioceptive experience by following the same recipe more than one time. And I was just thinking about this. There's a recipe to getting certain experiences. Everyone practices in the same way. You get sort of a commonality, even though you don't have to know anybody else that did something. Once you had a common experience, you understand something that can happen to people who do similar stuff. Yeah, I don't know if people who can do this sort of orgasm on command, I think they have other problems too. They're not it's not like a great thing, to tell you the truth, as I understand it. But, I was saying the other night, cheap high. I mean, it's very cheap. The old Rodney Dangerfield joke. Oh man, in no respect, I was poor. When I was a kid, I was so poor. If I was a boy, I wouldn't have anything. If I wasn't a boy, I wouldn't have anything to play with. So, yeah. Okay, let's get this done. Barbara Montero rightly insists on the private aspect when it comes to proprioceptive experiences of dance in this way. It is not merely that the proprioceptive experience seems private, since arguably there is a sense in which all experience is private. Rather, it is that the object of experience appears to be private. The object of visual experience, a painting can be experienced visually by many observers, while the object of proprioceptive experience, one's own body, can be proprioceived only by oneself. Cheap high, it's epic. Yeah. An explanation of why it is so that visual and auditory artworks typically dominate our understanding of the nature of art is here readily available. Such works of art are easily shareable and are also more easily accessible, since the spectator does not need to be the artist. Furthermore, as Schrenk puts it, there are of course practical reasons for our preference of sound and vision. The facility of reproduction and dissemination of the artworks, the possibility to enjoy the artwork at a distance, our relative excellence in the visual and auditory faculties, as for example compared to our poor sense of smell, our acquired ability to converse with relative ease about their respective phenomena, as opposed to taste, where almost only wine connoisseurs have gained the necessary vocabulary and expertise, etc. But, as already noted above, it might very well be that precisely because they are private, proprioceptive artworks provide a stronger aesthetic experience than the experience of a public entity, simply because there is a clear sense in which one is closer to one's proprioception than to, say, a painting. In this sense, the aesthetic experience arising from a proprioceptive experience is more immediate and is more directly related to our emotions, which are crucial when it comes to the appreciation of work of art, as we've seen in the case of Criterion D. On the one hand, then, such private artworks are at the disadvantage of not being publicly directly shareable, but on the other hand, precisely because of their private character, they can perhaps give rise to stronger aesthetic experiences. The private character of the proprioceptive experience thus not only cannot count against recognizing them as being possible artworks, but it might actually count as an argument in favor of recognizing them as such. Jiri Benovsky. Okay, fun. Cool. Let me see. Do I have a comment on this last thing? The notion of private, I don't love this way they define it. You might define it as a way closer to your, more of like a phenomenological artwork in some sense. A work that interacts with how you deal phenomenologically with the world, how you perceive it. So now, the privateness is, I think, mentioned here. There's a whole bunch of issues going on with that. So I don't know if I would call this private so much. I would call it phenomenological, perhaps. So like an artwork that exists within the phenomenology of a person. And that's where the proprioception exists. Because everything, you're always in some sort of perception, in a perspective. Every time you're sitting in a theater, movie theater, regular theater, whatever it is, your exact viewpoint Oh, you're welcome, Evan. Thanks for being here. Is your exact viewpoint can't be occupied by anyone else because you take up that physical space, and so your viewpoint on like a play is always unique. I mean, granted, it's probably it's probably less unique than other things, but like it's still always unique. And so the fact that there's always going to be some private aspect to a lot of this stuff. And that's what this, in sense, with all experience is private. In some sense, all experience is public then, because once it all gets this private way, it doesn't actually mean private anymore. And so I have some philosophical beefs with this notion of private, but it's okay. I would just prefer to say the artwork exists in a different area. It's in the phenomenology, not in the sort of object world. You've never felt more learned and also aroused at the same time. Well, get yourself back to school, and then you can have plenty of opportunity. I'm not saying doing it yet. I'm just saying get yourself back to school eventually. And then you'll have plenty of chance to do stupid things in an academic setting. But yeah. So I just want to make that comment on this notion of private. It's like people assume that we have private views on stuff. Like what you mean, this is Wittgensteinian point, is that like when you're looking out and you're like, well, I have this. No one else has my sort of experience, like that sort of thing. It's like, I know what you mean, but how private is that really? Like everyone else has the exact same thing and they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not actually that private. And it's like, okay. And then if you try to slice it up a little bit, it's like, well, no one has my exact angle. Well, who gives a rat's ass about the freaking angle? Like, it's like the angle's like slightly off. Like, that doesn't matter. Okay, good beef, but what the paper main argument, please, because I didn't join at the beginning. The main argument is just kind of what they said, that you can have erotic art, and then they just want to talk about it. That's all it was. The idea is that basically erotic art is a thing that you can enjoy, and this sort of proprioceptive act can be an artistic act. So the self-feedback that exists within sports, sex, dance, all that stuff can have aesthetic properties, and so the erotic arts can be aesthetically evaluated. And that's basically all they want to say. And they're saying, look, so basically they're saying just because it's private it doesn't matter, but it says it might actually count as an argument in favor of recognizing them as such, so erotic things as artworks. That's all they wanted to say. They want to say that erotic artworks are actually artworks. So, dude, I heard a slight New York accent when you were just getting heated. It does happen. I do break into a New York every so often. So, what journal is this? This is the British Journal for Aesthetics. So, I'm happy you liked it. Anything to say here? Oh yeah, this one is this is the criticism saying, oh, I do it better than you because I'm an experienced proprioceptive artist, so that means my sex is good. So that was this is the opposite of the earlier part in the thing where they were faking like they didn't have sex. This is the one where it's like they're saying, oh yeah, since I know what I'm doing, I'm professional, I'm better at it, and so I'm gonna be probably better at sex than you. So this is the the reverse of the fake virginity from before. Yeah, it was fun paper. So gotta love the aesthetics. Y'all have any more questions? I'm a little dry. I haven't broadcasted enough in the last few weeks, so I'm running out of I need to more talking than I usually do. So yeah. I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say. I mean, I agree with the author basically here in the grand scheme of this stuff. It's like they weren't pushing a big philosophical, they're not making some giant argument saying, oh, Immanuel Kant is wrong. I mean, Immanuel Kant is wrong, but like they were just saying, look, we should appreciate this artistic form and our erotic art as proprioceptive art, that we should appreciate this as an artistic form. I think they did enough to establish that it deserves a fair shot, basically. That, look, if you're going to deny it, it has all these sort of markers of being art, and so the denial would seem kind of ad hoc. If you had like special arguments for it, then that's okay, but like someone would have to produce those. And then they kind of went into like how this would actually work a little bit. What kind of concepts are you getting at that point? And then, yeah, so the question begging to deny it, basically. Then the criteria. This was the bits about what's going on in this kind of art. And why it's sort of unique in that you're participating and creating at the same time. And what was this? Yeah, this is like, and then how you have to be actually good at it to know what you're doing. So what actually counts as art in this area as opposed to other areas. So like in some sense, if you're trying to make a beautiful painting and you bring yourself a musical instrument, in some sense, you've done the wrong art. And so that would not count as a painting if you bring like a cello to like the painting studio. And not because you were going to paint the cello, but because you were going to play it. It's like, well, you've just done the wrong thing. And in that sense, you have to know how to do the right thing in the right way for you to get this right. So, yeah, and so then you have to know what you're doing. That's basically a matter of taste in the sense that you have to know what's good in this area. Okay, and then the privateness, I understand, was probably something that people were worried about. I'm less worried about it, but like this was just sort of, they had to go into this just as a defense against like obvious objections from like, well, you don't know what, like, you don't have my experiences, so how could that be art? No one actually knows what you're talking about. But those arguments aren't actually any good. Okay, so I'm exhausted. I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you for being here. I said penis 7 times and now 8 times. And yeah, I'll hopefully be back soon. I'm just like lightheaded at this point from talking so much. Okay, cool. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. And have everyone a good night. Stay safe out there. Be nice to each other. Be kind. And cool. And that's it.